You know, I like The Hill. I think The Hill is a pretty good show. Cristobal in particular. I know she has a point of view that, for the most part, that the loss of Warren has been mainly to Buttigieg. The catch here, though, is that there's an element of Warren's base that is also for Sanders, meaning if Warren wasn't in a race, those people will go to Sanders. And I've always believed that there is a larger share of those that may edge off to somebody like Buttigieg. I know some people make the argument that if Warren wasn't in a race, this kind of white liberal elite would immediately float over to Buttigieg, but they miss something. Warren's entire political strategy has been to ape Sanders. She wasn't doing it for her health. She was doing it because there were people who she believed that she could get who liked Sanders. But if you can get a person with a vagina and who's a little bit younger, they may come away with an assessment that says, close enough. My point is, there are plenty of people who currently support her, for the most part, that also supported Sanders. I mean, even in the morning consult poll, one of the things that became clear was that second choice of Warren was Sanders. I'm not saying that there isn't a contingent that goes in this kind of white working class that floats between Buttigieg and Biden and Bloomberg and that type of stuff. Yes. But there is also a contingent that goes to Sanders. But I would make the argument here, and especially in one of the other polling, I was like, where did those points go? It's possible that some of those points did indeed go to Sanders, that this group of support that Warren was able to convince, to fool, con, that she was somehow akin to him, has started to see the light, come to Jesus, and leave. And I'm going to make that point based on the polling that has just come out from Emerson. And again, the morning consult poll has shown for quite a long time that Warren's main supporters would go to Sanders. Now the catch here is, again, that doesn't necessarily mean that the people initially that bled themselves off, kind of like electrons at the very end, would eventually just float to Buttigieg. And that maybe the people who were more supportive of Sanders dealing with Warren were more stick-to-itive. But the Medicare for All thing, the Bolivia thing, the Venezuela thing, where she takes a point of view that comes across like Trump, the disingenuous aspect, the problem with authenticity, all of those things at some point become evident. And based on this dramatic fall that I have been arguing that she has been having, and this has been going on for at least a month now, going into the second month, shows that those people are beginning to see the light and coming back home. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal, Patreon. This video will be relatively short, only because it's just polling. Even though, I get enamored by the trends in polling, because I think the trends are more honest. Meaning the number, especially if you see a number that consistently stays up, meaning let's say Joe Biden. Well, that trend is that Joe Biden has been leading. It may be various polls, and you can look at all kind of the various number of polls that are coming out and say, okay, fair enough, I think he's in the lead. But within the context of that, there are other trends that show themselves. Sanders getting the youth vote, Biden getting the older vote, especially from the standpoint of the older African-American vote, Sanders getting the Hispanic selection. Those things show. The white liberal class loving Buttigieg to bits, also loving Warren to some degree to bits. Buttigieg eating into Warren's votes. However, I would also make the point that Sanders is also eating into her voting bloc. I showed before Sanders taking California, and I've even shown the Real Clear Politics average where Warren has lost the second place spot and is dramatically fallen. But here's additional polling to kind of make that point that much more clear, especially from Emerson. Biden, 23%. Sanders, 22%. Buttigieg, 18%. Nobody else is close. And I would even argue from this standpoint, really it's only Biden and Sanders. And that's been consistent at this point for at least a month or two. This doesn't really give the gist of it, though. right here. The most movement in this poll as compared to the last Emerson poll in October is Warren's downward slide from frontrunner status and Sanders' subsequent gain. Warren and Biden had 23% each on October, while Biden held his numbers in this poll. Warren fell 11%. Sanders has benefited from Warren's loss of support, surging 22% from 13%. Now, this is a trend also. It is consistent. Warren has slid, and that slid has been showing itself across a multitude of polls, not just one. Emerson is just showing what the other polls have also consistently shown. Right here. This is Quinnipiac. This is... Well, do I have Quinnipiac? I don't think I have Quinnipiac. Okay. So, and I did Quinnipiac the other day. This is tracking over time. Biden, 30%. Sanders, 22%. Warren, 16%. Buttigieg, 9%. Early primary states. Titans, 28%. 21%. Sanders, 14% for Warren. Buttigieg remains at 9%. Now take a look at this. This is Biden's trend line. Let's add Warren. Let's add Sanders. Look at this. Collapse. At the same token, Sanders takes the lead. This is a trend. And I make the point that the trend is honest, whereas the polling sometimes less so. The trend in this case has Warren utterly and entirely collapsing and Sanders gaining. This collapse is not entirely from Buttigieg, because Buttigieg himself has started to collapse. I don't know if you've seen the last Quinnipiac poll. I think I've shown it, but any notion of a surge for Buttigieg is over. The catch becomes those votes are going somewhere, and I suspect that some of those votes from the standpoint of Warren are not just floating between Buttigieg, it's going also back to the originator of the echo, Sanders. There's another stat that I want you to see that is mind-blowing. 35 years and old and under. Again, a trend for Sanders is getting youth vote. Sanders, 52%. Warren, 17%. He takes the youth vote so dominantly that you can add up everybody else in the race, and he still wins. That's how dominant that is. That is the youth of this country saying, we need something fucking different. We need something different. We don't like this. Going all the way up to the age of 35. We don't like this. An outright, utter, and entire rejection by the youth of this nation. Something is fundamentally wrong. The older generation, on their way out, we don't want to change it. We don't want to change it. We want things to stay as they were. At the very least, go back to Obama. He made us feel nice. He could sing Al Green. He made us feel nice. This is not about feeling. These are people who are looking for material things from their political apparatus to deal with issues that they themselves are having. And they have every right to do this. This is a democratic order, after all, right? People can come together as a community and make choices within the context of that community to get their political space, to attend to their needs, as opposed to attending to the needs of the wealth in the nation. The people who you're voting for, voting is a transactional process. I've said that before. You're giving that vote because you operationally want something in the world, and it should be used as such. You're not putting a name on a letter for a beauty queen. The purpose of the vote is not to get somebody who just stands there and look pretty. The goal of it is to get operational needs. Ideally, collectively, material needs being met and attended to. 95% of the income gains going to the top 1% is utterly and entirely atrocious, and it shows something is broken with the system that would allow something like that to take place. No society in their right mind having control of a political apparatus would allow such a thing to take place. There's a fundamental disconnect between what the political apparatus delivers versus what the public itself that is supposed in control of that apparatus once. What you're seeing is the race tightening between we like this the way it is and we want something fundamentally different. And that's what the race should be. What is the Democratic Party and what does the Democratic Party stand for? And to some degree, this race will make that choice. It's just to start, as the race in the UK is going to be about Brexit. This is Iowa, by the way, the Emerson stat. This is the race in total, national polling. This one goes to the early states. I just want to be clear on which each poll represents. The Quinnipiac poll was a national poll, and again, 52%. If I am not mistaken, Sanders wasn't leading in that Quinnipiac poll, but I think he was number 2 in that poll. But nevertheless, you get my point. Warren's collapse has been Sanders to his betterment. And I think, or at the very least, it comes across in the polling that the people who left her, in some measure, went to him. But that makes all the sense in the world, because for the longest time now, the second choice for Warren has been Sanders. Despite the fact that some of the people who bled off of Warren went to Buttigieg in the beginning, at some point you hit pay dirt. And it looks like we're hitting that pay dirt. Interestingly enough, Buttigieg supporters like Warren. But again, that makes sense. I don't argue that it's not the white working class or the white elite that likes these guys. They do. I'm just arguing that she's been aping him for a reason, and the aping, ideally, in some measure, would have to pay off. And in that paying off, those people believing that she's somehow akin to him. And even now, the people who would leave her would say, yeah, most of us will prefer Sanders. You get Buttigieg, 13%, but you even get Joe Biden with 23%. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? All right, I'll leave it here. I didn't want this one to be long. I just wanted to give an update on the new polling that has come out. And by the way, the 52% number is stark and extraordinary. He was doing this in the first primary. I think there needs to be a reflection within the Democratic Party in regards to what it stands for versus what its public, especially the youth, wants. Reflection. It's not a dirty word. Like, share, subscribe. I'll be right back.